Hello and welcome back to the Virtual Flower Show. We're here answering questions at the moment. So if you've only just joined us, I'll just go through our exhibitors and nursery people that we've got with us. We've got Rosie Hardy, herbaceous specialist. We've got Matt Soper, who knows everything about insect-eating carnivorous plants. Lynn Dibley, of course, famous for Streptocarpus, but lots of other house plants as well. And Alec White with his wonderful peonies. And we're going to start with Alec White on this second session. And this is a question that's coming from somebody asking if it's too late to cut back the old growth on peonies, Alec. So what would you recommend?
Well, the best time to cut back your herbaceous or intersectional peonies is in the autumn time, late October, I would say. The plant at that point will be completely dead. So it should be fairly obvious that it needs cutting back. If you haven't done it, it's not too late. You can do it now. Do be careful, though, because the new shoots are coming through and they're coming through at pace. So some varieties, some of the early ones are 18 inches tall already. So just be careful. But it is well worth tidying them up. It will help prevent any problems with disease later on in the summer.
Okay, so it is a tidy up now because, as you say, that new growth is going to be there and it's quite delicate. You don't want to be snapping that growth off because that's potential flowering stems as well, isn't it? But when are we likely to see the first flowers? I mean, they are quite early flowering, aren't they?
The first varieties, I think, will start flowering in the next week to 10 days, I would say. We've got some with big fat buds on here in the nursery already. So some of the early flowering varieties will start now, but depending on the variety, they will flower all the way through till the end of June, sometimes into early July. So the flowering window is a little bit bigger than some people think.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Right, a question for you, Lynn. This is coming from Jenny, and this is about Streptocarpus. A few of the leaves on my Streptocarpus have suddenly gone pale brown on the surface. What can I do to get them green again?
If they've gone brown, well, if there's several things. I mean, if they've generally gone brown slowly, it might be something like you've got aphid underneath the leaf, and that's sort of sucking all the goodness out of the plants. If they've gone suddenly, like if you just noticed it overnight almost, it might be something like sun scorch. So in springtime, if we've had a few sort of dull days, and then the sun suddenly comes out and it is really strong, sort of early April time, that can scorch a leaf that's got quite soft, really. It's not used to the hard lights. So if the sun comes out in the middle of the day and then suddenly, boom, those leaves will be scorched. It won't disappear, but if your plant's growing well and healthy, you'll get more young leaves coming over the top of it. And over time, you'll be able to remove that leaf. But I would leave it on the plant for the moment. It's not doing any harm apart from a little bit of not looking too brilliant. But it will still work as a leaf, you know, photosynthesizing and producing flowers at the base. So leave it for the moment. And then as it gets older, then remove it.
Okay. So you talked about strong sun on them. Is it, you know, ideally, should they not be in a bright conservatory or south-facing windowsill?
Yeah, I mean, in the wintertime, you can move them to somewhere brighter, like a south-facing windowsill, because the sun's not so strong. And but it's sort of, you have to be then careful. You move it away from that in the springtime into an east or west-facing windowsill, so they get early morning or evening sunlight. As the plants are woodland plants originally from South Africa, that they don't take the midday sunshine at all through the summertime. It will damage them. So it's that balance, a fine balance of having a good growth in the wintertime in a good light, but then removing them before the sun gets too strong.
Okay. And what sort of minimum temperature can they stand in the winter? Bear in mind they come from South Africa. How cool can we let them get?
Yeah, I mean, they will get quite cold, but you do have to keep them quite dry as well. They don't like to be cold and wet. In South Africa, they're used to being a dry winter, even though it does get cold. So if you keep them really, really dry, they will go down to 0 degrees. Right. But they will be a lot slower coming back in the springtime. So you can keep them in a greenhouse outdoors with very minimal heat, but just don't be tempted to water them at all.
Right, okay. Good, good. Right, thank you for that one. Matt, I've got a question for you. This one is from Andrew. This is about Venus flytraps. Can I use peat-free to grow these, peat-free compost, I presume that means, to grow these plants?
Yeah. At the moment, yeah, Sarracenia, we've had good results with some mixes we've been using over the last few years, and that's a mixture we use Melcorp mixed with perlite, 50-50, and then the other 50, so it's 25-25, and the other 50% made up of sphagnum moss, and that works really well for Sarracenia. And it's great if you're growing them in pots in a greenhouse, it works. If you have it out in a bog garden where they're stood in very wet conditions, the wood chip part of the mix starts to break down. But as wood does, it rots, and then it starts to upset the plant. So if you're growing them in pots in an unheated greenhouse, Sarracenia are fine. But another thing, you do have to repot every 2 years, whereas with peat, which is going to go soon anyway, you can leave it out in a bog garden. We've had it for 13, 14 years. You never have to do anything with it. Venus flytraps, they survive. They don't thrive, if you know what I mean. We do well with just pure sphagnum moss, which is very young peat, I suppose. So that's a great alternative. You can get hold of sphagnum moss that's been grown, and there are some places in the UK now that are growing it commercially, and hopefully it's be more readily available over the next couple of years. But sphagnum is a good alternative on its own. It's great.
To throw in a spanner in the works then, I mean, nothing related to growing any of your plants, but I know a question I've been asked a lot over the last few weeks is people are really struggling with moss in their lawns, having had such a wet winter, and people are raking it out. And I know in our lawn we've got so much spongy moss growth. If you actually rake some of that moss out that's very spongy and open, could you use that?
Yeah, do you know, that's a really good question, Martin. We get asked that a lot because it looks like, you know, green spongy moss. No, basically. No, you know, you need very acidic sphagnum moss. I mean, the plants have evolved. The reason they're carnivorous, they grow in areas that are very, very low nutrition. They get their nitrogen from insects rather than from the soil. So they grow in inert, low nitrogen peat. That's why they're carnivorous. The moss you get in the grass, I'm not an expert on moss, but it's the wrong type of moss.
Okay.
It looks good. We use that sort of moss around our displays at flower shows, but we never use it as a growing medium, and we don't top dress with it either. We just put it around the plants and then remove it after the flower show.
Right.
So,
okay, I was thinking there might be a little use for it if people are raking it out, but never mind.
Well, there is one, I suppose, if you lived like near us and Rosie as well. If you're down in the New Forest and you're lucky enough to have really acidic conditions, and you might well have sphagnum moss in your lawn. If you do and you know what it is, then that's absolutely fine. But if you've got normal, where we are, it's very chalky. And definitely not really alkaline, and that would kill the plants.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Best thing to do, I think, with the moss that you rake up from your garden there is you can use it. You can use it in your hanging baskets for lining it, because it's just literally another one of those, sort of a product that you can put in to line a basket. So that, use that. And the other thing is, it's really good for the birds. They love it to line their nests.
They do, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say to people, if you've got it, a lot of it, rake some out, but leave some, because the birds are always fetching it, aren't they? It's good to have, and it keeps it nice and moist, and you get all those little invertebrates running around underneath. So it is part of that lawn system. Rosie, that brings me to you anyway. Penstemons. I had a few inquiries about penstemons, and I know we've talked about plants with the harsh winter dying, being slow to come in, but are there any particular penstemons that you know of that are tougher than others, or any to avoid if you live in a cold area?
It's very difficult, because this year a lot of people are saying they've lost their penstemons, and I have to say, overwintered old ones outside that we have on the nursery, we're certainly lost probably 90% of what is there. They haven't liked, one, being in a container, and two, the weather that has come through. Things that are slightly better are the ones that grow and are rosette forming. So you've got the Campanulatus types, etc., which are much better from that point of view, because they don't actually create any wood that they then grow from in the spring. So you've got those, but the majority of the other varieties have all suffered this year through the winter, I would say. It was always a rule of thumb that those with the much narrower leaves and the narrower trumpeted flowers would be hardier, and that is generally still the case. But when you get something as harsh and as vicious as the winter we've had, and they grow a little bit from below ground, but they're still growing from the crown that is above ground, which is semi-woody, and that's got damaged, they're not going to come back, I'm afraid. So there are going to be, and there are at the moment, a lot of people asking for penstemons to replace what they've had.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose a good tip is, and it's something that I often do, I haven't done it this year because we've moved house, but often take a few cuttings off my penstemons in August, September as an insurance policy. And I always find if you do that and you root the cuttings, your plants in the garden survive. The 1 year you don't do it, that's when you lose them. So it's a good idea.
It always is.
Yes, exactly. So right, will you have any penstemons at the shows this year then? Will you have any left? Or, you know, I'm just thinking I need to
well, I mean, we produce a large number through the year, and we've got young ones available at the moment in small quantities, and next batch won't be ready for about another 3 to 4 weeks because they're rooting down, but then it's still a little bit cold to put them out. If they've been even if they've only just been in a cold tunnel, they still need hardening off. But yes, we will be having them available for people, because, you know, it's one of those plants which people love in their gardens. They give you lots of flower, lots of medium height in the borders, and they're so adaptable. You know, some will go in semi-shade, some will go in full sun, and you've got such a good colour range.
Yeah, no, they are lovely. So yes, I do. Well, I'm in the start of a new garden at the moment, so I shall be no doubt visiting you all at certain points through the year. Right, Alec, one for you. This is about tree peonies. Somebody has been in touch with us. I don't know their name, I'm afraid. They've got a large tree peony and I've no idea what type it is. Can they be pruned to reduce them in size? And if they can, when is the best time of the year to do it?
Well, they certainly can be pruned. Woody peonies generally respond very well to a good prune. So if you've got a well-established tree peony, woody peony, then I wouldn't, I'd encourage you to go out there and give it a good prune. Don't be afraid. It will reward you. There's really two kind of approaches I would say. The first one is if you've got a really tall woody peony that's got maybe 1 or 2 stems, probably I'd treat it a little bit more gently, and I'd probably only cut it back by about 1/3 and let it do its thing. If it's particularly vigorous, you could be a bit more adventurous and maybe cut it back even further. On the nursery, we tend to keep all of ours, we cut them all back in the winter to around about 9 inches, 12 inches. So we do give them a good hard prune. And that works really, really well. If you've got a woody peony in the garden that's more multi-stemmed from the base, you can almost treat it a bit like a hydrangea or something, where you can take out every 3rd stem, take out the oldest stems, and that will get a bit more light and air in there and encourage more growth. So two ways to do it, depending on the type of tree peony, woody peony that you have in the garden. In terms of when should you do it, the usual time to do it is in the autumn when the plant is dormant. So that would be the time to do it for most people. Here on the nursery, I'll do it even now, maybe even immediately after they've finished flowering, which sometimes knocks them back from a flowering cycle, but I find it sometimes a bit easier to manage. So personally, I don't think it makes a big difference. All you're really doing is playing with the flowering time. And if you prune it now, obviously you won't get any flowers this year, which seems a bit daft.
Flower on the previous season's growth, yeah.
But yeah, autumn is the time to do it generally.
Okay, right, that's good. So good advice there on tree peony pruning. Lynn, question for you. This is a bit of an identification one, and we haven't actually got anything to show you, so we're going to pull on your knowledge. It's a begonia one. This one's coming in. Somebody has seen a sort of low-growing mound forming begonia, pale green leaves, and it's got really small, delicate, pale orange flowers. They'd love to know what it is to try and get one. Have you got any ideas what that is from my description?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's Begonia Sutherlandii. It's a corm variety, so dies back to a corm in the wintertime, and then resprouts in the spring. I'm guessing it's that one. It has lovely, very soft leaves, not as hard as a lot of the begonias. Yeah, and it is quite fern-like in a way almost, but it is very delicate variety. Yeah, it makes a really good hanging basket plant as well. You can fill a basket up with tubers of that, and it's really it spreads down really well.
And they flower for a long period as well, don't they? Sort of right the way through the summer. And then I've got one in the greenhouse that's just waking up now in a pot, and the foliage goes a lovely sort of butter yellow in the autumn as well. So it's a good plant. I think that's what it is. Lovely. Available at Dibblies?
Later in the year, yeah, could we be sort of, because it dies back to the winter, we can't take cuttings until we start taking cuttings about now as the plant starts resprouting. Right,
okay. Good. So look out for that one, and hopefully you'll find one at a show or online. Matt, another one for you. I think this is I don't know who it's, Lisa. This is sort of generally about all carnivorous plants. Do I need to cut the flowers off when they produce them, or can you leave them on?
Venus flytraps, it's definitely best to remove the flowers. It's a very long scape, be about 2 foot tall, and it can take a lot of energy from the plant, especially if they're not catching many flies, and they don't catch that many flies, to be honest. So by removing the flower scape, you'll get much bigger traps and more of them, which is what you want. Sarracenia, we remove the flowers. The only reason we remove them is because we like to show them as a foliage plant, and when the flowers are nodding over the tops, the new pictures can come up and hit the flower and bend over, and we don't want that. So we find it's better just to cut the flowers off. It doesn't make that much difference in the amount of pictures they grow. I've seen people saying you'll get more pictures by removing the flowers. It doesn't seem to make that much difference, but for us, for aesthetically and displaying them, it's better just to remove them, and it makes more room for the pictures to come up, the leaves, which are what we want to show.
And on a Sarracenia, the flowers are very impressive, aren't they? They can be quite big on the stalks. I've seen just cut flowers.
Yeah, well, when we used to do Harrogate Flower Show, which is quite early, we used to show them in full flower because we didn't have many pictures to show. So we would have a few that we would take up there, and they look fantastic. And it's really funny. A lot of people say, oh, I like that plant, but I don't like the one next to it, which is the picture of the Sarracenia.
Right,
a lot of people think they're two different plants in the same pot. So it's very educational to show people that they've got rather pretty flowers and very unusual foliage as well. So
okay, so take them off or leave them depending what
you can. It doesn't. The Venus flytrap, definitely take it off, but the others, it's up to you.
Okay, that's good. Rosie, herbaceous one, had an inquiry from somebody wanting to grow herbaceous perennials, but they haven't got a garden. They've only got a patio area, all hard landscapes. But still want to grow them. Can they grow them successfully for a long period in pots and containers? And if so, what compost and any care tips you can give me for them?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. With herbaceous perennials, they like to grow, they like to put on a large amount of root. So the key and the best way of looking after them is remembering that you do really need to pot them up every single year. So the best time to pot them up and move them up a pot size. Don't go into a huge pot size. Just if the pot that they're already in, find another pot and just drop it to the side and see whether or not you're going to be putting in so 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters worth of compost around the edge, and again 4 or 5 centimeters at the bottom. That's enough to move it up, because otherwise, if you go into a huge big pot, it'll take them a long time to establish. So if you pot them every year, a general good quality multi-purpose compost is all you'll really need. And then as long as you don't overwater. This is the key thing with people growing herbaceous perennials in containers, is that they do tend to overwater them. So make sure that you don't overwater. If it's raining, then they don't need you to add any more water to them. If it's a dry spell and they're looking as though they're flagging a little bit, then by all means give them a bit of water either in the morning or in the evening. Don't do it in the middle of the day, only because basically they're not going to absorb it properly then, because the sunlight is just going to evaporate any water that is there. So it's better in the morning or the evening. And if you do need to give them any food, you can either incorporate a slow release fertilizer into the compost that you are putting it into, or you can feed once a month with a very dilute solution of usually something like a tomato food for herbaceous, because you're trying to encourage flower on the herbaceous perennials. And just look after them, you know, deadhead them occasionally, tidy off the odd dead leaf, and they'll be perfectly happy.
Okay, thank you. And if you've got a bigger container, such as a half barrel or a big trough, you know, you get these big galvanized troughs, I suppose there's no reason you can't plant multiple plants in to make a little mini display or herbaceous border. You know, you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is one really good way of doing it. You know, if you have a much bigger container, then think of it as a raised bed and put the material in, and you can have, you know, there's plenty of herbaceous stuff that will fall down over the edges. There are lamiums, there are ajugas, so they'll make a pretty edge effect, and then you can build it up like a border in there.
Yeah, good. Okay, good way to grow them. We're about out of time, so if there's anything anybody would like to mention, you know, anything you're doing, any videos you do online, YouTube or websites, Rosie, anything you want to mention? We'll go around you all.
Well, if people want to get lots of tips, I have got a YouTube channel, so it's Rosie Hardy Gardening on YouTube, and you can also ask me questions on there twice a month. We do a Q&A session, so that's probably helpful for a lot of people. Okay,
thanks. Anything from you, Matt?
Yeah, we've also got a YouTube channel, Hampshire Carnivorous Plants, and we go into a bit more detail on repotting and what you should do with them, how you should grow them and what have you. But you're asking about a tip, I think, earlier. And one thing I would, which going back on what we've been talking about, you've just got to be patient. And I don't think it just applies to our plants. You know, some years they are slow coming up, and just wait a little bit before you throw them away. Just don't be so impatient.
Not only to plants, but it applies to a lot of things in life as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Patience is good. Yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, if you want to hear more about certain plants or highlighted plants that we like, sign up to our newsletter. You can do that online, dibleys.com. We don't send out a huge amount. We won't swamp you. Maybe at the most once a fortnight.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. And Alec?
Again, there's lots of information about peonies on our website, primarosepeonies.co.uk, lots of blogs. Lots of information on how to choose the best peony for your garden. We've just written a book all about peonies, which you can buy now on our website too, and in other bookshops and things. So there's lots of information there about peonies.
Great, that's good. And I'll just mention, I also do a YouTube weekly video. It's called Pots and Trowels. So if you go onto YouTube and search Pots and Trowels, and it covers all sorts of gardening. It can be in the greenhouse, the vegetable garden, pruning, planting. We do something every week. It's also on Facebook as well. So thank you very much, the four of you, for answering all those questions. It's been great to catch up with you. Hopefully we'll see you through the season at one of the many flower shows that you attend. But for now, thank you very much, and everybody enjoy the rest of the virtual flower show. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.